Boker Tov, Shavua Tov, Sorot Tovot. Today's daf is Daf Mem in Baba Basra. Called Beis Yisrael on the Sunnah Batzar B'Shivya. We'll start with the last line on Lamed Tes and Beis. Amar Rava, or Nachman. We've been talking about a protest. Somebody's on your land, in your house, on your property. You make a protest, right? In front of how many people? Let's say you say I protested. There's no evidence to that effect, but you have to make a machah. If you have to have proof of that, so you do it in front of two people. Two Adam is always what's believed. Now, let's say you made them a protest in front of two people, and you didn't tell them to write it down. That we saw this take place. They can write it down anyway. They could say, yeah, here's evidence. We write down this document, this writ that. This man made a protest. Reuben made a protest to Shimon. That Shimon was on his land improperly. Let's say Reuben didn't ask him to write it down. Can they write it down anyway? Yeah, because it's the Zachan Ladam Shlo B'Fanav. It's only an advantage for him to have it written down that they protested, right? That to prove that he has proof. Here's proof that I protested. Here's two Adam signed a document saying that I protested. So he has proof that he protested within the 3 years. In other words, the point is that the key is the ma'arer, the person who's protesting, in this case Reuben, let's say it was really originally Reuben's field, and he's protesting, Shimon, what are you doing on my land? Shimon, within the 3 years, and the Adam can write it down that we saw this protest take place, even though Reuben didn't ask him to write it down, because it's only to his advantage. What about Modab B'fnei Shnayim? What about this is an announcement or a notice? I'm putting him on notice in a different case entirely, where a person says to the Adam, I'm being forced into this deal. I don't want to do it. They got a gun to my head. They're forcing me to do this deal. So I'm telling you in advance that I'm signing it, but I'm going to do the deal because they're forcing me at gunpoint, but I don't want to do it. So he's letting him know, and that's called a notice, an advance notice that I'm under duress. I'm doing this under duress, and it should be null and void. So he tells that to the Adam. I'm being forced to do this. We'll talk about the kind of cases that we're talking about, which cases he forced. I'm being forced to sell something against my will. So he tells them to Adam. The Adam can then write it down, even though the person under duress did not ask him to write it down and give him a document, but they can write it down because it's to his advantage. What is he going to try to do later? Say, listen, I didn't really want to sell it. They made me write this doc. They made me, confirm this transaction. I didn't want to do it. And I'm telling you in advance before I do it, they're forcing me to do it. You can write that down, even though the person under duress did not ask you to write it down, because it's only to his advantage to have such a document in his hand.
Is the document in front of the person who is?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. In front of who? We're talking about it. This is not the case of a machad. This is not a case of a chazaka. This is in general, if I'm being forced to do something. Let's just take an example. Gemara's going to detail the example soon. But let's say I'm being forced to give this woman a get. I don't want to do it. I'm being forced into it. So he lets them know in advance. Now they can write down, the Adam can write down that this man is being forced into it, and therefore he can invalidate the get later on. The other person who's forcing him to do it? No, that wouldn't be too well, because they're going to, that might cost him his life, right, if he does it that way. We'll talk about details more. Okay, let's say a man admits in front of two people, I owe Yanko $100. I owe him. He doesn't have IOU, doesn't have a document, but I owe him the $100. So there, now you just can't write it down. Man admitted in front of two Adam that I owe this guy $100. I admit in front of Adam. Adam can't write that down, because if they write it down and they give it to the Malva, look, this guy admitted they owe you the money. Now I can't claim I paid it up already. See, if I'm owed that I pay, if let's say I'm owed that I owe you $100, tomorrow you come for the house, I say, yeah, but I paid you last night. I paid you already. You believe. Not only that, if it's a milval pef, there's no written document. You can only collect from the chasam b'nei chorim, from cash, movable assets, things of that sort. If you have a written document, you can collect from real estate, etc. And I can't claim that I paid you back. So it's a disadvantage for the person who was motive that he owed $100 to have it written down. I don't want it written down. It's an oral IOU. That's good enough. So here you can't write it down. So here we're saying all these cases. If you make a macha in front of two witnesses, hey, you're on my land. It's been 3 years in my land. The Adam can write that down because it's to his advantage to have it. If he puts out a protest, I'm signing this deal under the get or whatever it was under duress, they can write it down because it's only to his advantage. If he's moda that he owes money, then you shouldn't write it down because that could be a disadvantage. What about a kinyan? You make a kinyan suda, right? You exchange something. Here, I'll give you my handkerchief and I acquire your car, whatever it was. It could be car, it could be karka, whatever. So there, you have to write it down because we'll talk about that because it's obvious that the person who's giving me the car wants to do it because he doesn't wait till I make a mashiach on the car or the cow or whatever it was. He wants to give it to me right away. So he doesn't mind if you write it down and have a written document. Kiyum shtaris b'shlosha. What is kiyum shtaris? That means having the court endorse or certify your document. What might happen? Here's a case. A man says the Malba has a IOU. It's got Lova owes me $10,000, and it's signed by two valid witnesses. They're here in the shul. They're members of the shul, but I'm afraid they may move elsewhere. And when I want to collect, maybe the Lova will say, it's forged. I don't know who's written over here, etc. So what I'll do is I'll take this document to the court now with the two Adam were signed on it. And they will say, yes, we signed on this deal. We saw the $10,000 take place. It was a loan. And the court will certify it. This is a court of three. A court has the ability to certify it. If it would just be two people, then it's just two other people saying what the other guy said. It's like 8 says Rajbam. But if it's the court has the ability to take away money, Hefker, Bez, and Hefker. That's an endorsement. So an Kiyum Shtaros, an endorsement or a certification of the star, there you need three people. Okay. All right. And then what do? The court stamps it. They sign it and they stamp it and they say these two Adam came to us in front of us and they certified that the money lent place and we accepted that and we certify now the whole this star. So you can't claim afterwards it was forged or it never took place or whatever. Okay. So we have all these cases. Some cases the Adam could write it down because it's only to the litigant's advantage when he says you're on my land or I'm protesting, I'm doing this deal under protest. It's only to his advantage. Amarava. We're in the fifth line on them. Amarava. Ikashali. If I have any difficulty with all these different cases said there, Rashbam asks, Rashbam is more detailed than Rashi. So he says, why didn't he say both? Rava said this in the name of Nachman. The first, second, and third cases could be said as one statement, but he learned them in different times, so he listed them all differently. Okay, Amarava. If I have a difficulty with one of these cases, this is the one I have a kasha with. Hi kinyan hefidami. What kind of a kinyan are we speaking about? You say there's a kinyan. Ikamai. How do you identify it? Ikamai sebezin. If it's like a maisa bezin that you need a court to certify it, then if it's like that's taking place at this kinyan, I gave you my handkerchief and in return you gave me your cow. If it's like a maisa bezin, plus you should need three people. You should need three people. Why do you say it's in front of two people? If the kinyan was made in front, in other words, if in the normal circumstances, when you sell chametz to the rabbi or whatever, it's done even if there's no Adam. That's agreed. There's no discussion about it. It's agreed. It's kinyan, right? But if you need witnesses to verify that it took place, later on you might say that you didn't give me the cow, so I want two witnesses. So if it's like a maisa bezin at a certification, shouldn't you need three? Elo kamaisa bezin, and if it's not like a bezin. If it's not like a mezon, why do you say you don't have to write it down? You can write it down anyway. If it's not like a maisa, if it's a maisa bez, then you should need three, and then it's definitely certified. If it's not like a maisa bez, it's just like two Adam. So why don't you have to say so? Well, maybe it's not to his advantage. You saw this exchange take place. I gave you my handkerchief or my pen, and you gave me your cow. Now maybe you don't want it written down. Maybe you don't want it written down. Two Adam saw it; they could testify to it. But can they just write it down, the star, or make a star on that on their own? Maybe it's not to your advantage. Maybe you don't want it written down that you gave me the cow. Three people who saw it take place. A three Adam could be three people. Three Adam constitute a bezdin. If you have three people, that's a bezdin. So that's what I'm saying. If you need an equivalent of a bezdin, so you should need three. If it's like a court certified document, and if it's only like a not court certified document, it's only two edim or testifying. Why are they allowed to write it down? You said they could. You said that kinyan b'fnei shayim, and you don't have to write it down. You can assume that they want it written down. Why? Why is it an advantage? Maybe it's a disadvantage. It's an advantage to me if I'm protesting my property or on my property. So I'd like a written documentation of that. Even if I didn't say write it down, it's understood that it's an advantage for me. If I say I'm writing this, I'm doing this deal under duress, and you testify to that and you put it on a document, that's an advantage to me for sure. Why is this an advantage to him? Am I in a circle? Why do you say you don't have to even write it? Even if you don't tell them to write it down, they can write it down. So Buster the boy, after Rava had discussion, in other words, Rava really quoted Rav Nachman in all these cases. But then he said, the one thing I don't understand so much is the kinyan. Why do you say that the kinyan is in front of two people and you can write it down even if the litigants did not say write it down? Why? If it's a Maisa Bezdin, and that's why you don't have, you can write it down because it's like a court, so you should need three. If it's only two edim, why do you say you don't have to write it down? Why is it an advantage to them? Most of the boy, after Rabbi asked the kasha, he answered. He says, "Lo, it's not a Maisa Bezdin. It's two witnesses. It's not a court certified document. Love to Maisa Bezdin dummy. The reason why you don't have to say ksavu, time my day in Sorach Lomik. So why don't you have to say write it down that you automatically can write it down? Mishum the stam kinyan liksiva omei. If a kinyan is made, it's understood that it can be written down. Meaning, Rashbam explains like this, that Rashbam is about 10 lines, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. Shum de'ein lacher kinyan klum, meaning a kinyan is final. The key of the makla basura be'efeidim, since you gave me your cow, all I did was I gave you the handkerchief and you gave me your cow in front of witnesses, and you're giving it to me right away. You don't wait till I pull the cow, make a mashich or something like that. Or you have to take a chazak on the karka to show ownership, demonstrate ownership. Obviously, Kirk wanted to give me that cow generously. He says, yeah, that's a good deal. So he wants it written down. So Mistama wrote, he doesn't mind if it's written down. He gives an example. He says, if you tell Adam to write something down and sign it and then give it to him, the document, if the guy made a kinyan, then you could definitely give it to him. If you didn't make a kinyan, maybe he changed his mind. He says, write down the document, sign it. But if there was no kinyan made, then it's not final. If you made a kinyan, it's final. So here too, once a kinyan was made, you can assume that the person who's giving over the item, you're giving me your cow in exchange for my pen or my handkerchief, you can assume that the deal is final and you don't mind if it's written down. And therefore, they could write it down. In all these cases, it didn't say write it down. In all these cases, except for the case of the where he was moted to a loan, there he doesn't want it written down. But in the other cases with the protest, the mecha, or the modar, where he says, I'm telling you in advance that I'm doing this deal under duress, or in the case of the kinyan, you can assume that the guy doesn't mind if you write it down. Therefore, the Adam could write it down and give him a document and say, we saw this and this took place. Now, a document is like a bill of sale. It's something of a proof. You could claim that it was forged. You can claim this. You can claim that. It's not Adus in court. Adus in court has to be from a person. The person has to testify in court. It can't be on video. It can't be aid me paid. It can't be hearsay. It's got to be where he said it specifically. So, but here you have a document. A document means something. When do you write a modar? Modar, we said, is a notice. I'm putting you a notice that I'm doing this deal under duress. Right? I'm being this guy is forcing me. The bad guy is forcing me into this deal. So I'm letting you, Adam, know that I'm going into this under duress. So he says, when do you write such a document? Ella aman delot sayestina, only for a person who wouldn't listen to the court, meaning a bad guy who won't listen to the court. Because if the guy is a good guy, meaning he'll listen to the court, he's a bad guy that he's forcing me, but he'll listen to the court and he's forcing me, just take him to court. Take him to court right now. Hey, they're forcing me to do this. I don't want to do it. So why should you write this document if the guy's forcing you, take him to court? So he says, no, you'd only write it in the case where a guy wouldn't listen to the court. Then you have no choice, and you'll have to, try to enforce it later on. Abai of Rabbi Damatai, no, they say disagree. Afilo alive alecha, even people like us, Abai and Rabbi, rabbis who would listen to the court, you would still write a duressing. Why? Because maybe the court's not available right now. Maybe there's something going on right now. Somebody's forcing you into a deal of some sort. We'll talk about those deals, whether it's a get, right, or a gift. Somebody's forcing me to give them something. I don't want to give it to him, but he's forcing me into it. So I'm letting you know right now that I'm writing it under duress. I'm letting you know, right? You see that he's forcing me, and I'm letting you know that I'm writing under duress, and you could write that down. It says, even, why would you write it down if I could just take the guy to court? Even if he would listen to the court, maybe the court's not in session right now. Maybe I can't get to him right now, so therefore you could write session. So again, if witnesses were told by a man, I'm being forced into this deal, they can write it down, and that'll help him later on to claim that I didn't want to do the deal. So by Ami Nardoi. Nardoi said this, listen to this. Kol modah the loksibe, any notice like this, notice, we'll call it a notice of duress. Any notice of duress, the loksibe that's not written in it, you have to write in it. Ananya didn't be ba'onsa the planya. We know what's going on. We know this guy's being forced. It's not simply that he says, hey, I'm being forced. Maybe he says, Sam, I'm being forced. I'm being forced because he wants to get around the deal. Maybe, how do you know he's being forced? So a notice of duress has to be with the Adam sign on it. I'm the two Adam, aid number one, aid number two. We're signing on it. We know he's being forced. We saw what's taking place. We know he's being forced. Ananya didn't be onto the planya, right? You have to have that written down there. If you didn't write that in there, you just say, oh, Jim is being forced into this deal. Do you know how he's being forced? Well, we don't really know. I think he said something about that. That's not. We have to know that he's divorced, that he's being forced. That if he doesn't have those words in there, I know how he's being forced. Lav modohi. It's not a proper notice of duress. Now the Gemara says, what's the case? Like we're talking about duress of being forced into it. What kind of a deal are we talking into? Moda damai. E the gita udamatanta. Let's say it's a get, a divorce document, or it's a gift. The man says, I'm being forced to give my wife a get, or I'm being forced to give this gift to Jim. I'm being forced to give it to him. Why would he lie? Why do you need to know the nature of how he's being forced? They threatened him. They told him they're going to take his house or kill his wife or do something. Whatever they threatened him with. Why do you have to know that? If a man says, I'm being forced into the get, think about it. He must be telling the truth. He must be telling you. Why do you have to know the circumstances? If he's not being forced, just don't give the get. If he doesn't want to give the get, if he wants to give the get anyway, right? If he wants to give the get, so let him give the get. Why does he have to say I'm being forced into the get? He wants to give it. If he doesn't want to give it, but he's being forced into it, so if he tells you I'm being forced, you must believe him. Why would he tell you? Why would he tell you what's in the? Why would he lie? Why would he say I'm being forced if he's not being forced? If he's not being forced, just don't give the get or don't give the gift. I'm being forced to give Jim $1,000. So therefore, you should know when I give him the money, it's not valid. Why should he lie about that? If he's lying and he's not being forced, don't give the money. Understand? If he's not being, why would he lie? Why did the Adam have to know the nature of how he's being forced? They have to know that he's being forced. There's a gun and all this, and the guy's threatening him. He's kidnapping his child or whatever he's doing to force him. Why would he have to do that? And why would they have to know the nature? It's enough if he says I'm being forced. Because if he's not being forced, then don't do it. He doesn't have to give the gift or give the get. So that's what he says. What kind of a notice of enforcement we spoke about? Either get to the batanta, it's obvious. He's just telling us what's obvious. If he says I'm being forced, he must be being forced. Because if he's not being forced, don't give it. I'm being forced to give my wife a get. So what do you say? Well, you have to know how he's being forced. Why do you have to know? Why would he lie? If he's not being forced, he doesn't have to give the get. He doesn't want to give the get. And if he wants to give the get anyway, right? So then what is he making a notice? Why is he telling you I'm being forced? I want to give the get. So why would he lie? That's the point. What's in it to lie? If we're talking about a get or a gift. Ella, if he does mean it, maybe it's a sale. Here's what's going on. He's selling his property because he needs money. Right? Why do people sell stuff? Because they want to raise money. But he says tomorrow I'll get money. My CD is coming due, or I'm going to make money on the horses, and I'll get money and I'll buy it back. But they won't let me buy it back. So I'll let the Adam know now in advance I'm being forced. I'll tell them I'm being forced. So if the Adam don't know the nature of how he's being forced, then you could say, okay, here's something that they have to know how he's being forced, because maybe he's lying. See, in the case of the get or the gift, right? There's no reason for him to lie and say, I'm being forced, if he's not being forced. Yeah.
But with the get, she'll go out and marry somebody and then he'll come and say.
Oh, that's right. That's a very good point. And therefore the Rashbam says that in Lamaisa, in Halacha, the rabbis always said that when you give a get, you have to say that any notice of force, any notice of that I was under duress, I coerced, right? Any notice of duress, that I used that word before, any notice of coercion, I'm about for that. Because that could happen, right? So when you give a get, you have to announce right before, you have to say any prior things like they do with a will. You know, they always say any other wills that made till now are null and void. Well, any notice of duress or coercion that I've given before is I know that those are null and void because you shouldn't have that situation. But basically, the point is that we're dealing with this. Why did the Adam have to know the nature of the coercion in the case of a get or a divorce? He must be telling the truth, because if he's not telling the truth and he's not being forced and he doesn't want to give it, so don't give it. So he must be being forced. But in the case of a sale, he might be lying. He might say, "Oh, I'm being forced into this deal," so that later on he can go and claim it back. Later on he'll say, "I was forced into it. Here's the money back, and I want my item back." So there they must be told. But in the case here, they must know what the nature of the coercion is. We don't write a notice of coercion on a sale. The Rashbam explains the reason, because we're going to see later on. If you were forced into a sale, if there's Adam that you were forced into a sale, you get back. You don't have to write a notice. If there were Adam that you were forced, if there's no Adam there, then you're stuck. It's your word against his. But if there's Adam there that you were forced into a sale, you're off the hook. The Gemara will later on make a difference. If you're forced into a sale of this particular property, this item, whatever it is, and there's Adam you were forced, you can get your money back. The deal's off. If let's say you were forced to sell one of your properties, you have many properties, and you were forced to sell, give us one of them, and you chose one of them, then the deal's not off. That's not considered coercion. The point is that there's no reason to write a notice of coercion. If there's Adam there, that's all you need. If there's Adam that you were forced into a deal, and you're entitled to get your money back, you don't need the notice for it. So therefore, what kind of a notice of coercion are we speaking about, says the Gemara? You have to know, what you say over here, the Adam have to know the nature of the coercion. They have to write in the notice of duress, or I think coercion is a better word, Michael, thank you. If they don't write in the document the nature of the coercion, right? So then it's not a good document. Says, what are we talking about? If it's a get or a gift, they don't have to know the nature. If the guy says, I'm being forced, he's being forced. Why would he lie? If he's not being forced, don't give it. If I'm not being forced to give the get or give the gift, don't give it. If he's not being forced, it must be that he's telling the truth. Why do you know the coercion? And if it's for a sale, you don't write a notice of coercion on a sale. So because says the Gemara in the fifth line, Moda Rav is Moda. Right? I'm a Rabba's Moda. Even though Rabba says you don't write a notice of coercion because you don't need it. Echad the honest, where it's clearly that he's being forced, right? Where he clearly being forced. That how is that? Ukamaisa the partisa. There are cases where sometimes you're forced and you need the Adam to know the nature of the coercion. What's the Maisa partisa? What's the story with a partis, an orchard? The Ugabra. There was a man. Listen to this. What happened was he had a malva and a loba, right? The malva lent him $10,000, our case, standard case, and the loba gave him his orchard, right, as a mashkim. The tlashanin for 3 years, he could stay on the land for 3 years. Basarach tlashani, obviously the loba was not smart and he didn't protest in the 3 years. After 3 years are up, the loba comes to get his, let's say he paid back his loan now, and he comes to get back his karka, the mashkim. After 3 years, Basar, the Achlash, he was after 3 years of Chazaka. Amar Le, he told him, the Malva now wanted to keep the orchard. The deal was for 3 years, right? Pay back the loan in 3 years and give back the orchard. If he did it mashkan to the surah, or he didn't eat the Paris, whatever it was. Now the Malva is going to cheat and say, listen, I want this orchard. I know it's yours. I'll buy it from you. If you sell it to me, fine. I'll pay for it. Elo, if you don't sell it to me, kavishna l'shtar mashkanta, I will hide the IOU that I have on you that says that you're giving me this mashkan as a mashkan. And I'll claim that I bought it. I'm going to claim that I bought it. Kahai Gavna, in a case like this, Kasvina Modah, in a case like this, even Rabba's Moda, that since it's very clear that the guy is cheating and you write a Modah. In other words, normally you don't write a Modah on a sale, right? But in a case like this, you write a Modah on this kind of a sale. Now, the Rashbam says, so how do they know? You asked before a good question. You asked before, well, if you write it in front of a guy who's coercing him, somebody's gonna get killed. Right? You don't want to do that. So Rashbam says an interesting thing. Take a look on Rashi in Rashbam, about halfway down, a little bit more than halfway down in the wide lines. Right. Everyone says Rach, hey, if you other way, then bonus. Now, what are we saying? In a case like this, what are we saying? That if you write a notice of coercion, you have to know the nature of the coercion. Otherwise, you can't write it down. So he said, what do you mean? Not with a get or a matana. You don't have to know the nature of coercion. If he says he's being coerced, obviously being coerced, or else he wouldn't give the gift or give the get. So he said in the case of a sale, but in a sale, you're not allowed to. In a case like this, where it's clearly that he's being coerced, that he's being coerced, that it's not like maybe the seller is just trying to say I've been coerced, because he wants to buy it back tomorrow. Here's the case here. If you had a way to bonus shabbat, how do they know? If he did it in front of the Adam, right? And if the Adam are there, who saw this Malva say, listen, either sell it to me or I'll claim that I bought it from you 3 years ago and I lost my star. So, well, if the Adam heard that, you don't need a modah. The Adams heard that. The Adam heard that. The guy would be pretty stupid to say that in front of Adam, right? But if he did, they heard already. They heard this claim. They heard this with the Malva, who's a bad guy, who said, listen, either sell me the orchard or I'll claim that I bought it. He's a bad guy, right? So if the Adam heard that, you don't need a modah. That's good enough. Just bring the Adam. The guy came with this indirect mess. The Kach Pirush, and this is what the Rabbeinu Chaz. So how do you have the case? How will the Adam know whatever the Lova says, I'm being forced into the sale, right? Because he tells me he's going to steal it if I don't sell it to him, right? Well, that's what the Lova says. But how will the Adam know that that's what took place? You say when you write the notice of coercion, you've got to know the nature of the coercion. How will they know? He came to listen. But he told him, listen, this guy's forcing me into this. So I'll tell you, we'll play a little game. I'll tell you what we'll do. I'm going to go, you come with me, and I'm going to go and say, give me my land back. You give me my orchard back. And he's going to say, he'll say, I'll claim the land back. And you'll hear him say, no, I bought it, right? Now that the Malva is playing this trick, he said to him, so he comes to him and says, now the Lova is going to go back to him again and say, listen, give me my land. I bought it. You didn't want to sell it to me. I say, I bought it. That's what the Adam are going to hear. I bought it. Okay. And you have no claim. I bought it. Afterwards, what is he going to sell? I'll sell it to you. I'll sell it to you. And the other guy says, okay, give me a star. In other words, what happened? He said, remember the Malva told him originally, either sell it to me or I'll claim I bought it, right? So now the Lova heard this, tells the Adam what's going on. And he goes and says to the guy, well, give me my land back. He said, I bought it from you. And he fulfills his threat. I bought it from you. Then he goes over to him afterwards and he says, okay, I'll tell you what. Okay, he said, okay, I'll sell it to you now. Privately, I'll sell it to you now. Okay, give me a star. Give me a star. Sell it to him. Pay me. Okay, give me a star. Now they write out the star, and he told the Adam, I'm doing the star under duress. You heard him say that he bought it. Now we're going to do the star, and I'm going to give him the star, and he's going to give me the money. And then later on, when we're going to come to the court, you're going to say, listen, the Adam said, what's the date of the star? Now, today. You heard him claim that he bought it from me 3 years ago. That's the proof that they know. Now they know he was coerced, right? Because the guy wants a star, but the star is dated today. And they heard him say that he bought it already 3 years ago. That's how they know he was coerced. That's what the Rashbam says. And then it goes from Shalom Mocher, right? The star, that Mechadamim. Well, the Halach Zeh, the Sipulay, told them what's going on. Masham lo Zeh lechto lo star mechira. The Chainasa, Karam Shekasav must have before he gave him the star. Maladim, you heard him say that he bought it already 3 years ago. and I'm reading the shtar right now, and I'm getting the shtar. Hashta Masar and I'm telling you now, the lava, I don't want to do it. I don't want to really sell it to him, but only because he denied that it was a mashkan and he claimed that he bought it. And then I'm going to take the din. What's my claim going to be? The shtar mechira is from right now. I mean, I bring him to court later on. He's going to say, look, I have a bill of sale, but the bill of sale is dated today in 2024. And he claimed that he bought it in 2020 or 2021. That's how they got him. So that's how he knows. That's how the Adam can say, yes, we know the nature of the coercion. And that's what we say. If you write a notice of coercion, you have to know the notice. You have to know the nature of the coercion. Amar Yehuda, back in the Gemara at the 2 dots. I'm Matanta Tamir said. Let's say you wrote a gift. You gave somebody a gift, but the gift was written, and there was a document on the gift, like a deed. You wrote like a deed of the gift, but it was written in hiding, in secret. That shows you wanted the Adam to write it in secret. It shows you that you had some other purpose. You didn't really want to give it wholeheartedly. Maybe you're giving it to him just to avoid, that you really want to give it to somebody else. So if it's a secret document, a secret thing, it's not enforceable. You can't collect with that. Now the recipient says, look, I got this document, but it was written in secret. You can't collect with it. What's in the case of that? Amar Yosef, what do you mean a secret document? Amar Yosef, the Amar Lulasadi told the Adam, go hide and write it down. Don't write it down publicly. Go into a secret room and write down that I'm giving this gift to Yankel. I'm giving this gift to Yankel. That's not a valid document. The fact that I want it written in hiding, that shows that I've now impaired the nature of the document because I didn't want it public. Do it in hiding. Well, maybe because you're just trying to avoid, you really want to give it to somebody else. Or you're trying to say when somebody else will get it from you later on, you'll say, oh, I already gave it to this guy. It impairs it. Some say Rav Yosef that what's the nature of it? How do you do it? Lo Amalu? He didn't tell the Adam taste of a sit in the marketplace of a brisa or in a public place for tichulei. If he didn't say write it publicly, that's already considered hidden. The difference between these two explanations of what a secret gift document is, Stama. He just said, okay, I'm giving this as a gift. You can write it down. He didn't say write it down in secret, and he didn't say write it down in the public. So the nafkamina be, according to the first shot, if he didn't write it down in secret, that's a good document. According to the second shot, if he didn't say specifically write it publicly, then it's not. Then it's a hidden document. Amarava, even though this secret gift, let's call it a secret gift, is not valid, it's not enforceable, but it does work to make the next gift invalid. In other words, this document is really invalid. It's not a good document, but it helps to make a subsequent gift invalid. It's a modah. It's basically a letter of coercion for the next document, meaning that if I give the document again, I gave it, let's say, to Reuven, and I said, write that in secret. So he said it's not enforceable because it wasn't written publicly. But it's good enough, it's strong enough that if afterwards I gave it to Shimon, then it won't work for Shimon. In other words, it's like a notice of that I was of coercion. Just like, what is a notice of coercion? Saying that the transaction I'm about to do, selling this, is not valid. Well, the same way, if I gave a gift to Reuven, if I give it first to Reuven and then I give it to Shimon, the fact that I gave it to Reuven means I can't give it to Shimon because I'm invalidating the gift to Shimon. So even though the gift to Reuven is not valid, but it's valid enough so that it's not good for Shimon. That if I subsequently give it to Shimon, that Shimon doesn't get it. Amra Papa, that's what Rava said. Rava says, well, it's not valid, but it's valid enough to invalidate the subsequent document that I gave the same item to Shimon. Amra Papa, other Rava Lab favorite Rava didn't really say that, but it was deduced from something that he said. Whenever you have in Shas, he didn't say it befavorish, but rather it was deduced from a story. That means to say it's not correct. The deduction was wrong. What was the story? There was a story. That happens. A man went to Mekadosh Nisha. He said, will you marry me? And Amrle, she said, if you give me all your assets, I'll marry you. I want you to write everything in this. This is not the typical, This is not the typical prenup, right? Where everybody keeps their own stuff, right? Here she said, here's the prenup. You give me everything, then I'll marry you. Okay. So he said, so he apparently agreed. right? It's an Amrle. I'll be your wife. I'll marry you. Otherwise, I'm not going to marry you unless you give me everything in advance. Also, he went, Kasfala, so he wrote the document. He didn't give it to her yet, but he wrote the document. He had it prepared. He gave it to the lawyers, and they prepared the document. Also, then his elder son came. This is what always happens in Zivik Sheni, right? In a second marriage, right? Also, his older son came and said, what's with me? What, you're giving away my Yerusha to this lady? What's going on over here, right? Amar lahu l'sadi. So he told the witnesses, Zilu atmru Yamina. Go to Yamina. It's a far distant place. Go to some place over there, and the kisfule and write him everything. In other words, he was going to play a trick on the wife, right? You might say it's a kedusha toss, but whatever. But he said, okay, go write a document that I'm giving everything to my son before we give the document to the wife that she gets everything. It's the old Jewish thing. He gives everything to the son, then he'll give everything to the wife, but it's too late, right? Because write it to him. Also, again, they came before Rabbi with this question. Now what happens? And they gave the document first to the son, then he gave it to the wife, but he had already given everything to the son. They came before Rabbi with this question. Omer Louis said, "Lo markan of lo markan." Neither one of them gets it. Neither one of them gets it. So, in other words, why did he give it? Both of them were basically under duress, right? Both of them were given under duress. It says neither one gets it. Neither one will get it. Mandachas, the one who looked at the psak din savar mishum dahabi modah lechaberta, meaning the one that he gave the one that he gave to his wife. Technically, she made a deal. She said, "Listen, if you give me all this stuff, I'll marry you." It's not duress. He doesn't have to marry her, right? It was his choice. He gave it to her, right? But the first one that he gave to his son, that was under duress because he did it in order to avoid giving the stuff to the wife. In other words, he did it for that. So the first one is not valid because he didn't really want to give it to the son. He just gave it to the son so that he wouldn't have a fight with him. So the first one was under duress, but even though it wasn't valid, but it was enough to invalidate the second one, right? It was enough to invalidate the second one. Had he written the document to his wife and said, "You have everything," it would have been okay. But since he gave it first to the son, that shows that he doesn't really want to give it to the wife, right? So it's good enough for that. So he says, so they deduced from here that Rava says that the first one is at least good enough to invalidate the second one. The first document that he gave over here, where he said, "I'm giving to the son," may not be good for the son, but at least it also, what it does is invalidates the second one. So a hidden document that he wrote in secret may not be valid because he wrote it in secret. He didn't publicize it. He's giving it to the first son. Presumably, since it's his oldest son, there were probably other sons there too. Also, were fighting about that too. So he wrote it in secret. So a secret document is no good. It's no good. So this first son can't get it. But the fact that he invalidated it for the wife shows that the first one, if the first one's not valid, you could say that the second one is valid. Maybe he did give it to the wife. The first one was written in secret. The second one wasn't written in secret, the one that he gave to the wife. So why shouldn't the wife's one be good? The answer is because the first one invalidated the second one, belogi. So what do you see? That even a secret document, which is not valid in and of itself, it's not enforceable, but it's good enough to invalidate to the second one. So he says, no, belogi. Hasam muchamilsa, there it's clear, it's obvious. The machmasun surah Kosovo. He only wrote it because he was forced. He didn't really want to give it to her. But in a regular case, where what happens? He wrote a secret document first, and we say that's not enforceable. Then he wrote another document afterwards. He wrote a document to Ruvain, and he didn't really want to give it to her, so he wrote it in secret. So that's not valid. But when he wrote another subsequent one to Shimon, maybe he wanted to give it to Shimon. He didn't want to give it to Ruvain. In this case, he didn't want to give it to the son, and he didn't want to give it to the wife. He was being forced into it. So you might say, so Rava said, you know what, neither one's valid. The first one was hidden, and the first one was hidden, but it showed enough that he wrote it. It showed enough when he wrote it that he's trying to use it to show that the second one's under duress, right? That the second one is no good because it was written under duress. So even though the first one's not valid because it's hidden, but it can be used as to show that the second one's under duress. No, that's a special case because there it's clear that he doesn't want to give it to either one of them. He didn't want to have it. But in a regular case where he wrote a secret one to Reuven, so he said that's not enforceable. And later on, he wrote a good one to Shimon. So it's the same thing as Shimon. There, he wasn't forced into it. There's nothing there. Nobody was pressuring him. And there, maybe the second one would be Kona, and it wouldn't. And the first one would not be a notice of duress or a notice of coercion for the second one. But back to our question over here, the way Rashbam explains it, you said that if you write it in secret, it's not valid. It's not enforceable, right? You can't collect with it. So what's the secret one? The first opinion of Yosef was that he told the witnesses write it in secret. The second opinion was no. He just wrote that he told the Adam to write it. He wrote it stam, right? If it's secret means the first opinion was that he wrote it in secret. He said, listen, he said go write it in secret. And the second opinion was that he said that he didn't tell them to write it publicly. If he didn't tell them to write it publicly, it's already a secret one. The difference is if he wrote it stam. So what about now? The Gemara says, so what's the halacha? Yibaylu stamamai. If he told them to write it, he didn't say write it in secret, but he also didn't say write it in public. What's the halacha? Ravina says we're not concerned. What does that mean? Lo chashinan the eina tmurasa elikshera. If he said stam, that's okay. Rav Ashi Omer chashina. No, we are worried about it. If he didn't say write it publicly, we are concerned that it's not valid and you shouldn't collect it. And you are concerned. Rashbam says, look at Rashbam, even with the words Rabbeinu Gershom, you can't collect with it because we're concerned that maybe it's a hidden one since he didn't say write it publicly. But if you did collect with it, lo madrina, we also don't reverse that transaction because we don't really know. So we're worried maybe he meant to write it in secret and it's not valid. So you shouldn't collect with it. But if you did collect with it, you can't demand it back. Rashi didn't say, well, maybe you don't collect with it. The suffix take him, leave it wherever it is. Says but you don't collect it. Therefore, you should write in a star. Every star, like a gift deed, or a deed gift, whatever you call that, a deed gift. You have to write in there. He told us you have to write. He told us to write it publicly in the shuk. And sign outside. He just said stam write it. He said stam write it. He meant to write it in the way the rabbis were. Write a document. Write it the way you're supposed to write it, which means write it even publicly, like he told us to write it publicly. If he doesn't say in the document he told us to write it publicly, even though he didn't say it, but he meant to say write it the normal way. If he didn't say that, it's not really enforceable. So that's why he says, we're worried you shouldn't collect with it. If he didn't say write it publicly or write it stam and means write it publicly, it's not enforceable, right? But if you did collect with it, even if it's not enforceable, you can't demand it back. So tomorrow's Mishnah, all right, we'll pick it up from you tomorrow. The Mishnah tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. We'll have to get through to that. Yeah.
Wills are all written privately. They're not. A will is written. It's not written public.
Yeah. Right. Right. It's a gift. Right. Yeah. That's true. But you could say it's public because the lawyers write it. They have to have signed. The way they write wills now is that it's usually signed. Right. A will is really a gift document. You're right. A will is a gift document. It's not a Yerusha. It says I'm giving this away before I die. So, but usually there's an Adam there and sign it, so that's considered public. He didn't say write it privately and nobody will know. He says it could be public. You could publicize it. Or he said it's stam. Like saying now, Rashbam says stam is also do it in the normal way it's done, so it could be publicized. Yeah.